Games, board games, board games. I'll talk about interviews. Board games, board games like what you get in the news, or what you might have when board game designers are interviewed by people, others, and people sometimes talk about other stuff, like, hey, is this game too easy or too tough? And maybe we will talk about representation in games or how games are in another nation. And anyway, interviews are what I'm talking about. Interviews, interviews, and I'm not gonna shout. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is. Wherever you are, it is time for Busy Beats and Board Game Blether. Episode 699. Can I just point out that tomorrow is going to be my 700th episode special. Today, I am about to get to train in a wee bit. I'm going to be interviewed by, well, it's more of a panel show. I don't know how to describe it. We're going to chat about games and what games you might take if you were hypothetically going to another place and you had very small luggage size. You want something small to fit in. You want something that is easy to teach in another language. And maybe it's just good for non-gamers, good for making friends. Maybe not too many rules. Maybe something that can be played with a variety of player counts. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing today. And inspired by that interview, I thought, let's talk about what makes a good interview. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've been on a few podcasts, like We're Not Wizards was my first, and that will always hold a special place in my heart. But yeah, I've been on so many, and it's been an absolute delight to be on all of them. And every interview I think I've enjoyed in different ways, and every guest that I've had on, 99% of the guests that I've had on, I've appreciated. And, most of the guests that you don't see, again, just for the record, it's not because I wouldn't like to have them on, it's just because, that's the way that life is. And I do prioritize either people who are able to come every couple of weeks, which makes it incredibly easy for me. Hello, Jessica Medringham and Alan Paul, or people that I've not had before and having them on a few times. And then we have a few conversations and that runs its course. And then it's like, yeah, that was nice. And maybe see you at a point in the vague future. Anyway, before we talk about interviews, let's quickly chat about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. What have you been up to? I have been, yesterday, I went for a special appointment. I, set up some stuff for episode 700. I wrote some descriptions for all the people. I announced them all on Twitter, so that feels like, hey, mission accomplished. I had a fairly gentle day. I went dancing. I went to Mambo and Cha-Cha-Cha. And even though this teacher, they're like a taskmaster saying, oh no, not great, back from the start. And sometimes they say, oh, you need to be like the wind, you need to be smooth, don't be true. And I'm like, what exactly are you saying? I don't quite understand. Please use clearer language. I don't understand your metaphors. But it was absolutely fun and I'm enjoying it and I'm looking forward to next week. Anyway, brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Interviews are brilliant because interviews are a chance for two people to connect, or indeed multiple people. Sure, job interviews, I understand there's a bit of tension, but if you come away from it thinking, you know what, this is a chance having a bit of a chat, and yes, there is a power imbalance. Yes, in a job interview, it's like, okay, can I convince the other people that I'm good enough? But have fun. I mean, that's the key thing. Like, people are interesting, and I hope that you'll agree with me. That's kind of, shut up and sit down, said humans are interesting, and because of that, board games are interesting because humans are interesting. And that is the key thing. Like, people change the game. People being alone together around the cinema, like, there's some joy about the other people. There's a human connection, and you can get information, you can be entertained, you can ask things that have never been asked before. So let me go into it a wee bit more. As always, feel free to comment, ask questions, thumb, like, follow, but I appreciate all your respectful comments and questions. That is why I do these things live, to have your input. So what is a good interview? And genuinely, what do you think? To me, it's about relevance to the audience. And that kind of comes down to marketing. That comes down to picking a sensible title. Like, tomorrow, my 700th episode is going to be about efficiency. Now, if I picked the title of how amazing are these people, or swimsuit bikini models, that would be, you know what I mean? Sure, I might get more people that way because sex sells, but then those people would be disappointed. Like, finding the right audience is assuming that what you're doing has some audience. Finding the right audience is fundamentally about conveying and communicating what you're doing, marketing in an honest, clear manner. That's what it's about. And then you need to have a cohesive tone and subject. I mean, I say this knowing that I go off on loads of tangents. I, always have my recent highlights and what are you doing next at the end of the show. And I always like to have these little extra bits. Sometimes I have the questionably quick questions. When Paul Grogan came on, we didn't just talk about rules. We talked about gaming fools. What's a mistake you made? Gaming jewels. What's the most energetic game you played? But even then, it was all in the topic and tone of, let's get to know Paul. Let's get to know that person. And similarly, when Tanya Thompson comes on tomorrow, we might not always be talking about Hasbro. We might not always be talking about efficiency, but like, it will be within that, I hope, and that will be the starting point. And it's okay to have this as your main topic and then kind of deviate, as long as you keep coming back to it. I think that's the key thing. And if you bring up a topic, then try to explain it. Like, if you say, why are pronouns important? Why is using a pronoun important? Then don't finish your speech without even addressing that, although that's maybe just me being pedantic or autistic or whatever, and realizing that not realizing that they actually just meant, why is using the correct pronoun important, which I absolutely agree, and I didn't need to watch the video, but I was curious about why are pronouns important. And yeah, for the record, I kind of had several hours of thoughts about it afterwards, and I thought, okay, it's tradition, it can save syllables, and in modern day it can sort of affirm someone's identity and show that there's a safe space. But I don't think that pronouns are super important. But anyway, again, that's the point. Come back to the topic. So have that cohesive tone. And if a cohesive tone, it's not just about what you're talking about. If you are light and frivolous, stay light and frivolous. And if you are going to go into something super dark, then give people trigger warnings. I have talked about incredibly dark stuff. There is a line that I would not cross. And I don't want to say where that line is, because then like that risks people, bad actors kind of tiptoeing to that line. But I will happily talk about muffins and baked goods or showers, and I'll have talked about genocides, like, because sometimes these are important things. And about wars. Like, that's not the point of the show. But when you have a big shift like that, I think it's important to give people trigger warnings, to give people an expectation of what they can of what they might see. A good interview should ideally pass on information. I'm talking about recorded interviews, and maybe that's repeated questions because you're creating, oh, that person talked about that one thing and that was really interesting. Let's ask them about that thing again. And then you're kind of, as the interviewer, doing the job of thinking what they might want to talk about, or as the interview thinking, well, these are the highlights. But don't, as the interviewee, normally don't push too much. Like, let the interviewer push more, I would say. And then the other thing that can be really good is if you're asking questions that have literally never been asked before. And I made sure to do this with some guests that have been interviewed tens of times. I listen to older interviews if I can, especially if it's a designer that I'm passionate about. I might have already listened to most of them. And then I'll try to ask them things that have never been asked before, because that is what makes it an interesting conversation. It encourages them to think. And as an interviewee, you want to supply information that's never been supplied before. Even an informative piece can entertain. That's the key thing. Like, everything is kind of about entertainment. Like, even when you read the news, even when you watch a documentary, information is fun. Learning things is fun. Let's keep it fun. And you can't be specific, because that's both entertaining and informative. If I say that, I didn't just say I went dancing yesterday, like I said that I went to Mambo and Cha-Cha-Cha, and I gave a little detail about my teacher. Maybe you associate with that, maybe you don't, but it tells you something about my life. Hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully it's informed you. Maybe it tells you about my values. I think it's important to speak clearly. I could always do a better job of this, of enunciating better, and at a roughly even pace. Now, I do not mean that every syllable needs to be at the exact same rate. I don't mean that every word needs to be at an even pace either. I mean that it should... This is where I sound like my dance teacher that I was annoyed at now. I mean that ideally you shouldn't have long pauses. It should be legato. It shouldn't be suddenly speeding 100 miles an hour and then you think of a million things to say and then you can't quite catch up and then you stop. Ideally, like, sometimes it's good to be fast, and sometimes you do want to have a little bit of a pause in your conversation, just like that, and that, and that, like that little pause. And that's okay. Like, that's what full stops and commas and all these things are about, but it should ideally be flowing. And sometimes it's worth, as a speaker, slowing down your thoughts so that you can then speak a little bit slower than you normally would, but then carry on speaking at a normal pace without a sudden stop when you run out of things to say. Of course, when there's two of you, then hopefully once one person has run out of things to say, the other person will pick up the slack. So it's all good. That's the joy of having two people on camera. That's why I've got loads of people on camera tomorrow, to keep me entertained. Research and plan some things to ask or say. But it's okay to not get to everything. You don't have to ask every single question. If we end up going on a tangent, or if one thing seems really interesting, then do that. But at the same time, going back to that relevance to the audience, if you've promised to ask certain things, then you should at least go through them, even if it's really quickly. And finally, involve everyone present in an actual conversation. So if it's a live stream, when people say hello, I try to say hello, but that's not the most important thing. The more important thing is when people actually ask questions. I might not get to that question immediately, but I will try to answer everything that's been asked. And when there's different people on the camera, I will try to ask questions and then listen to the answer, and then if there's an obvious follow-up question, go and ask that, and if they've not given much of an answer, more about that. Or if they have a good answer, maybe try to um, just confirm what I heard. I think I might be lagging. I think my computer might be dying. Let me. Hello. Sorry about all the technical issues. I'm going to try and force quit the browser. Yep, browser is dying. Laptop is not working well, but and I see that there's. If anyone commented, then I apologize. I do not see everything. Basically, the last thing I was saying was to involve everyone present into questions, and annoyingly, I see that there's been 2 questions asked and can't get to them. Oh, hello, Timmy. It is lovely to see you. Thank you very much for saying hello. And how can I... Oh, let me just shut down the computer, hard reset. There we go. So you basically involve people and make sure it's a conversation, because that's what a good interview should be. If it was just, here's a list of questions and I want your answers, then it might as well be written. You might as well not be there as an interviewer. And if you aren't going to answer any questions from a live audience, then why have the live audience? I kind of feel, yeah, that's the way I feel. But yeah, that's me. And what do you think makes a good interview? And if I missed your comment or question, then I do apologize for the technical issues. Let me ask you the question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. I mean, the main question of the day is really what makes a good interview to you. But I understand that's a fairly big question. So my next question for you is, do you prefer forks or spoons? I definitely prefer spoons, and I use them more just for a bit of peanut butter, for anything liquidy. I must admit, I don't always use a spoon when I'm having soup noodles. Sometimes I'm just like chopsticks, and then I have a kind of bowl with a corner so I can just drink it out of the corner of the bowl, which is quite nice. It's a square bowl. It's my favorite bowl. I used to have 3 of them, but then 2 of them got broken by, in my last place.
They went missing, I don't know where. But yeah, do you prefer forks or spoons? I'm all about the spoons. Let me know. And over to you, what are you up to? You can share botany if you want to. As I mentioned, I am going to get the train, go to be interviewed, and I'm excited for that. And yep, that is pretty much it. I hope that you have a good day, whatever you're up to. And if you are up to something fun and frivolous, super serious, something you have to do, something you want to do, let me know. Please do share. I promise that I care. Today, to recap and wrap up, I mean, it's kind of on the bottom in the description, but basically, interviews are good because of entertainment and they can inform, and you want some clear speech, you want some insights, you want to communicate it clearly, you want to be relevant, find the right audience by saying what you're about to do. Have a cohesive tone or subjects. If you're going to be super dark, then give people trigger warnings. Pass on information, that's the key thing. Maybe you curate the best information, so like just don't repeat all the stuff from previous interviews. Ask maybe some questions or present some information that's never been presented before. And it is about entertainment. Even information can be entertainment. It should be entertainment. Be specific. That's cool. Speak clearly. Speak at an even pace. And do some research. Do some planning, whether you're the interviewer or the interviewee. But you don't have to get to literally everything. That is okay. And yes, as an interview, sometimes it's about self-promotion and don't go overboard. And the most important thing in my mind is to involve everyone present in an actual conversation. Timmy says, "You're feeling humid." Well, I hope that I mean, that sounds good. I mean, it sounds like you're relatively warm, which makes a change from a few months ago. So enjoy the relative warmth. And I have to skedaddle. I have to go catch the train to get to my interview. So lots of love. And for now, that's the end of the show. And the only thing left to say is, of course, oh, wait a minute. I forgot to say, I'm in all the places as Stuff by Bez. Tomorrow I'm having my 700th stream, so please do join that. That will be an epic, like, almost 8-hour thing. I'm going to try to finish before 8 hours, just so that Facebook gets the full thing, because Facebook glitches out after 8 hours. And share, spread the word, although I do encourage everyone to view on Twitch as much as you can. Thank you very much, everyone. And the only thing left to say is, of course, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye. Bye, bye, everyone.